Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the demonstration that we're going to do around the Truyo data governance platform here. I'm going to show you a few things, and I also have my colleague Mike here to discuss a little bit about how these things might inform data governance decisions at the federal level or even within a consulting firm or some private sector firm that might be working with AI solutions. So my name is Taylor. I'm the Vice President of Data Science and Applied Statistics with Reveal Global Consulting. I work closely with the Truyo platform in delivering our AI solutions to our partners.
And as Taylor said, I'm Mike. I'm a senior advisor with Reveal Global Consulting, and we'll start things off. So we have a number of different clients, one of which is the Census Bureau and then other statistical agencies and organizations. So with these groups, complying with disclosure avoidance rules and criteria and law is highly critical. Maintaining confidentiality of sensitive data is important. So as we're deploying AI, we need to make sure our clients are comfortable with what we're doing. So Taylor, show us how we do that with the Truyo platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Truyo does is it gives you visibility over self-defined risk, or sometimes client-defined risk, over what it means to manage your AI use cases. A lot of times people come to us on different levels of the maturity adoption of AI. They could be just experimenting with it kind of at the ground up, or it can be something that's part and parcel of the way that they do business. And depending on where they are on that curve, what data governance does for them is totally different. So I've set up a platform here, and I put some data in here that shows what it looks like when you haven't done a very good job managing your risk. You'll notice there's a lot of information on here that's red, yellow, orange, and it sort of tells you where the risks are based on our self-defined risk criteria. And what does self-defined risk criteria look like? So a lot of these things, these are AI risks that we have here, they come from some sort of source document that you're measuring against. In the case of the federal government, they care quite a bit about regulations that come out of executive orders, sometimes regulations that come out of technical agencies like NIST, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And what you want to do is read through those regulations and say, here are the key points that those regulatory bodies care about. And sometimes if you're in Europe, for example, they have an actual law on the books that you need to be compliant with. In the US, such a law does not actually exist yet. So you have to rely on some of these best practices that might be delivered from the agencies. So here's a list of certain risks that are here. And what you can do is you can look and see whether or not some use case that you have is compliant to those risks. And so if I click on this one, for example, I have an AI use case here that I've already loaded into the platform. And right now the question is, the AI system is not discriminatory. That's like a goal that is in the regulations that are applied, right? And if you click on it and you take a look here, you can see how it was responded to. So in this case, the developer might just say, no. Right? Could this use case result in bias and/or discrimination against any consumer, employee, or individual? The developer might just say no to this, and they might say, hey, we've managed the risk because it doesn't contain this. This is not really a sufficient burden of proof. And so it goes to the AI governance board to look this over and decide whether or not what the developer has provided is sufficient for the management of that risk. So you can think of it a little bit like a visibility platform in that way. So when you look at your total dashboard, you can see all of these risks in here and how they were responded to, but then you have to go through and validate that the reasons that somebody says that a risk is managed is actually met and applied kind of carefully in that way.
And this is critical because the client is going to be asking us these same questions. This is critical because the client's going to ask us the same questions and require that we comply with their expectations, which also are drawing from the same documents, legislation, executive orders, and so forth. Do you have an example of one where we are highly compliant and we've managed the risk?
Yeah, so what I can show you is this scorecard, right? So this is an example of a scorecard where, like I said, I set this up to show what happens when you don't manage your risk properly, like when you actually haven't gone through and done the hard work that it takes. Because I think that's where a lot of the gaps are in people's understanding at all levels of maturity, is you understand that you have to govern your data, your AI use cases, and things like this, but you don't exactly know how. And so you can see here, right? For strategy and structure, there are sort of three key things that need to be done, right? So there needs to be a governing board. We talk to a lot of organizations that don't have an AI governance board at all. They have nobody to actually go in and provide an expert evaluation over the use cases, which means you have left the development of these tools completely in the hands of the developers themselves. And the developers themselves are really interested in the technology. What they're less interested in is how this might cause impacts for the broader organization, right? They're not necessarily thinking about this. They're trying to produce the best possible outcome as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And then there's an ethics and principles assessment, which exists, and maybe you might only be compliant on 19 or 26 of those elements. That's user-defined. So you go in there and you make these ethics assessments based on the type of law or type of regulation that you're targeting or trying to be compliant with. And what you'll notice here is that right now I haven't loaded in an AI acceptable use policy. The fact that it's incomplete or doesn't exist tells you as the organization you need one of these things. And if you don't have one of them, it means that you are failing on this. It doesn't matter that you have governing board members. It doesn't matter that you have 19 out of 26 on your ethics assessment. You have to have an acceptable use policy in place. And if you do not, then you are not managing your data correctly, you're not managing your AI use cases correctly, and you're exposing yourself to enormous amounts of risk. Have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I'll just add that having been on the client side of this, having been in federal government for 34 years, 25 of those in management, I would be looking for this kind of information, not only from my staff, my federal staff, but also from any contractors that we're working with. Because at the end of the day, on the program that I'm managing, I'm responsible for all of these risks that would be put in place by whomever, if it was Fed staff or contractor staff. So these are critical not only for your own organization, but for the organizations that you're working with or working for.
One of the last things I want to show you here is this notion that you can actually identify use cases that you don't know exist yet. And sometimes when you are loading these things in, a lot of it is coming from the developers, the decision makers in your organization that says, well, I created this AI use case to solve this problem, and I'm trying to sell that to some organization, and I know about that risk because I created it. But what happens when you have AI use cases embedded into your code that your developers are using that you as a management officer might not know about? So what Truyo enables you to do is to scan the source code to understand what the content of it is in there and what are the instances of AI use that are maybe happening under your nose that you don't know about, or maybe your developers don't even know count as AI in the frameworks that you're considering using these things. So what's really neat about this, I think, is that you can take a look here at the instances, and it will scan the source codes, and it'll tell you actually the line numbers in here where certain pieces of AI-related technologies are being used, and where they might count as AI, even if the developer doesn't necessarily think about them that way. You can also look at some of these things here, where you can scan the repository. So you give it a GitHub location, and then it will scan that GitHub, and you can actually pick the branch that you want it to look at. So maybe you have some sort of main branch where your application is deployed, then you have some development branch, and you want to take a look over that development branch and understand what's going on in that branch and what the developers are building, and whether or not there's an early use case that can be caught. This isn't to try to catch people using AI for nefarious purposes. It's to make sure that when AI is being used, it is being documented. So it covers yourself, it covers your clients, it covers the organizations that you're working for, and crucially, it covers the people that the AI is going to be interacting with, especially the data that is underneath it all. It's very, very important, especially for public organizations. The big thing for them is trust. If you're a public organization, and especially in federal statistics, if you're trying to collect good data, you want people to be willing and excited to give you that data. And if they don't believe that you're using that data for something good and for the public good, then you are doing the public a disservice by not tracking that information in the most robust way possible. All right. Anything to add to that?
No, nothing else to add. I think that was a good way to kind of cap this off, that it's all about, with everything, I guess I will have a little bit more to say. With everything we're hearing about AI and all of the concerns that people have, demonstrating that trust, and demonstrating how you can measure and prove and build that trust is absolutely critical. It'll help ease the process of adopting AI and getting people to be comfortable with our use and adoption of AI.
Thank you very much, Mike. I think we've hit our quota here on time. Thank you for coming to visit us. And if you'd like to talk more about AI governance or about the Truyo platform, I'll be around. Thank you.